Hello there, and welcome to Deep Sleep Seas. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you've had a long day, or perhaps you're the kind of person who finds comfort in falling asleep to the mysteries of the ocean rather than counting sheep. Either way, tonight's journey is designed for you. You have nothing to do but rest. Let your mind relax, your breathing slow, and your body grow light as if you're floating in calm, warm water. Because tonight we're going to drift through one of the ocean's most beautiful and essential phenomena, a continuous snowfall that happens in darkness, far from any winter sky. We're exploring marine snow, not the frozen flakes that blanket your neighborhood in December, but something far more ancient, far more vital to life on Earth. It's a gentle, perpetual rain of organic particles that falls through every ocean, every day, in every season. It drifts down from the sunlit surface waters into realms of complete darkness, feeding creatures that will never see daylight, transporting carbon to the deepest trenches, and playing a role in Earth's climate that scientists are only beginning to fully understand. What you'll hear tonight may surprise you. The ocean, it turns out, has its own weather, its own storms and calms, its own rhythms of abundance and scarcity. And at the heart of it all is this soft, continuous shower of particles that look, when caught in the beam of a submarine's light, exactly like snow falling in slow motion through dark water. It's hypnotic, it's beautiful, and it connects the smallest microbe to the largest whale in ways that science is still discovering. So settle in, let your thoughts drift, and let's begin our descent into the deep, following the gentle fall of marine snow as it makes its endless journey from light into darkness, from the surface to the abyss. Picture this. It's the early 1930s, and two men are sealed inside a metal sphere, barely 5 feet in diameter, dangling from a ship by a single steel cable. The sphere is called the bathysphere, and it's descending into the Atlantic Ocean off the coast of Bermuda. Inside, cramped and cold, sit William Beebe, a naturalist and marine biologist, and Otis Barton, the engineer who designed this contraption. They're breathing canned oxygen, fanning themselves with palm fronds to circulate the air, peering out through small quartz windows into the black water beyond. William Beebe had spent years studying birds in tropical jungles, documenting pheasants across Asia, exploring the Galapagos Islands. But something about the ocean had captured his imagination. The surface, he felt, was only the beginning. The real mysteries lay below, in depths no human had ever observed with their own eyes. So when Barton approached him with blueprints for a deep-diving vessel, Beebe saw his chance to become the first biologist to witness deep-sea life in its natural habitat. As they descended, Beebe kept up a running commentary, speaking into a telephone line that connected him to the surface ship above. A woman named Gloria Hollister sat at the other end, headphones on, carefully transcribing every word he said. This telephone line was their only connection to the world above. If it went silent, she would have no way of knowing if they were safe or if something had gone catastrophically wrong. And then, somewhere around several hundred feet down, Beebe saw something that took his breath away. In the beam of light projected from the bathysphere's window, he saw particles, countless particles, drifting slowly downward through the water, like snowflakes falling through a winter sky. They tumbled and turned in the light, some small as dust motes, others several inches across, all descending in a continuous, gentle shower into the darkness below. He called it marine snow. The term stuck. It was perfect, because that's exactly what it looked like. A perpetual snowfall in the middle of the ocean, far from any winter storm, far from any frozen sky. Beebe understood immediately that he was witnessing something profound, some fundamental process that kept the deep ocean alive. These weren't just random particles. They were food. They were energy. They were the link between the bright world above and the dark world below. From his cramped sphere, swaying on its cable in the dark Atlantic, Beebe had discovered one of the ocean's most essential cycles. And though he couldn't have known it at the time, what he was seeing would turn out to be crucial. Not just for deep-sea life, but for the entire planet's climate, for the carbon cycle, for the very air we breathe. Marine snow, a gentle rain in the darkness, a connection between worlds, and it's falling right now, this very moment, in every ocean on Earth, just as it has for hundreds of millions of years. To understand where marine snow comes from, we need to start at the surface. In the uppermost layer of the ocean, called the photic zone, or euphotic zone, sunlight penetrates the water. This is where photosynthesis happens. This is where the ocean comes alive with microscopic plants called phytoplankton, single-celled organisms that drift with the currents and use the sun's energy to transform carbon dioxide and nutrients into living tissue. Phytoplankton are astonishingly productive. Despite their microscopic size, they produce about half of the oxygen we breathe. They absorb as much carbon as all the forests and grasslands on land combined. They form the base of the oceanic food web, supporting everything from tiny zooplankton to the largest whales. Without phytoplankton, the ocean would be a desert, and life as we know it would be impossible. But phytoplankton don't live forever. Their life cycles are brief, measured in days or weeks. Some are eaten by zooplankton, the tiny drifting animals that graze on them. Some die from lack of nutrients or changes in water temperature. Some are infected by viruses or consumed by bacteria. And when they die, they don't simply disappear. Their bodies begin to drift downward. A single dead phytoplankton cell is almost too small to see with the naked eye. It's barely heavier than water. On its own, it would take months to sink even a few dozen feet. But these cells don't remain alone for long. The ocean is full of sticky substances. Phytoplankton themselves produce mucus and gel-like compounds as part of their metabolism. These substances, called transparent exopolymer particles or TEP, act like glue in the water. As dead cells drift and tumble, they stick to these gels, forming larger aggregates. Zooplankton add to the mix. These tiny animals feed on phytoplankton, filtering them from the water, and what goes in must come out. They produce fecal pellets, compact packages of partially digested plankton wrapped in mucous membranes. These pellets are denser than the original plankton cells, and they sink faster, often at rates of dozens or even hundreds of meters per day. As they sink, they collect more particles, growing larger, becoming more complex. Other creatures contribute too. Salps, barrel-shaped gelatinous animals that look like transparent jelly jars, filter enormous volumes of water as they swim. They produce sticky mucus webs to catch food, and when they're done feeding, they discard these webs. The abandoned mucus nets drift through the water, collecting particles, forming structures that can be several inches across. Appendicularians, another type of gelatinous zooplankton, build elaborate houses made of mucus to filter food, and when these houses become clogged, they abandon them and build new ones. The old houses sink, gathering more material as they descend. Even sand and dust play a role. Wind carries dust from deserts and continents far out to sea. This dust settles on the ocean surface and gradually sinks, becoming incorporated into marine snow aggregates. Volcanic eruptions can inject ash into the atmosphere that eventually falls into the ocean. Microplastics, unfortunately, have also become part of the mix in recent decades. Tiny fragments of degraded plastic that get caught up in sinking particles. All of these components, organic and inorganic, living and dead, sticky and solid, come together in the surface waters to form marine snow. The aggregates grow through a process called flocculation. Particles collide because they're sinking at different speeds or because ocean currents and turbulence bring them together. When they collide, the sticky organic compounds cause them to adhere, forming ever larger clumps. This process accelerates during phytoplankton blooms. In spring and summer, when sunlight is strong and nutrients are available, phytoplankton can explode in numbers. The water turns green or brown or red depending on the species involved. Satellite images can capture these blooms from space, vast swaths of colored water spreading across hundreds of miles of ocean. When the bloom peaks and begins to die back, the amount of marine snow increases dramatically. The water becomes thick with falling aggregates, a blizzard of organic matter sinking toward the depths. The formation of marine snow is not passive. It's driven by life, by death, by biological processes that have been refined over hundreds of millions of years. It's a transformation, turning microscopic plankton and dissolved organic matter into visible particles that can sink quickly through hundreds or thousands of feet of water. And once formed, these aggregates begin their long journey downward, carrying energy and nutrients from the sunlit surface into the dark interior of the ocean. The journey of marine snow is about to begin. The flakes have formed, they're sinking, and the deep ocean is waiting, patient and dark, for the nourishment that is perpetually falling from above. When a marine snow aggregate begins to sink, it enters a world in constant transition. The ocean is not uniform. It's layered, stratified, with different densities and temperatures at different depths. As particles sink, they pass through these layers, experiencing changes in pressure, temperature, salinity, and light. And all the while, they're changing too. The speed at which marine snow sinks varies enormously. It depends on size, density, shape, and composition. Small aggregates, only a few millimeters across, might sink at rates of 50 to 100 meters per day. Larger ones, several centimeters in diameter, can fall at rates exceeding 500 meters per day. The largest aggregates, massive clumps formed during intense phytoplankton blooms, can sink even faster, descending thousands of feet in just a few days. But these are just averages. Individual aggregates behave unpredictably. Recent research has revealed something surprising about how marine snow sinks. The particles don't fall straight down like snowflakes in still air. Instead, they trail behind them a wake of disturbed water. This wake creates drag, slowing their descent. The shape matters tremendously. Elongated particles can actually sink faster than spherical ones of the same volume because their narrower cross-section reduces drag. Flatter particles tumble and spin, creating complex flow patterns that can slow them down considerably. The aggregates are also porous. They're not solid objects, but loose assemblages of smaller particles held together by sticky organic matter. This porosity affects how they interact with the surrounding water. As they sink into denser water layers, they can absorb salt, changing their own density. This absorption can actually slow their descent in ways that weren't understood until very recently. The physics of how soft, porous, irregularly shaped organic particles sink through stratified fluids turns out to be remarkably complex. As marine snow descends, it doesn't fall through empty water. The ocean teems with life, and much of that life is hungry. Within the first 1,000 meters of descent, the vast majority of marine snow particles are consumed. Zooplankton intercept them, filtering them from the water or actively hunting them. Small fish snap them up. Gelatinous animals like jellyfish and cone jellies trap them in sticky tentacles or feeding structures. Everything that can access this falling food does so. Bacteria and other microbes play an enormous role. Marine snow aggregates are colonized by bacteria almost from the moment they form. These microbes live on the surface of the particles, feeding on the organic matter, breaking it down, respiring it back into carbon dioxide and dissolved nutrients. The concentration of bacteria on marine snow can be thousands of times higher than in the surrounding water. Each aggregate becomes a tiny ecosystem, a miniature world hosting complex communities of bacteria, protists, and other microorganisms. The bacteria don't just consume the aggregates, they transform them. As they break down the organic matter, they release enzymes that further fragment the particles. They produce more sticky substances that can cause aggregates to either hold together more firmly or break apart depending on conditions. They consume oxygen in the water immediately surrounding the particles, creating tiny zones where oxygen is depleted and different chemical reactions can occur. This bacterial activity means that marine snow is remineralized as it sinks. The organic carbon in the particles is converted back into inorganic carbon, carbon dioxide dissolved in seawater. The nitrogen in proteins is released as ammonia, or nitrate. Phosphorus is freed from organic compounds and returns to dissolved forms. This remineralization releases nutrients back into the water column, making them available again for phytoplankton if the water currents carry them back to the surface. The vertical journey of marine snow, then, is also a chemical transformation. Particles shrink as they're eaten and decomposed. They lose mass, they become less dense. Some aggregates break apart entirely, fragmenting back into smaller pieces that sink more slowly or become suspended in the water. Other aggregates encounter turbulence or are shredded by zooplankton feeding, creating plumes of smaller particles that can remain suspended for days or weeks. This means that the deeper you go, the less marine snow there is. The concentration of particles decreases exponentially with depth. In the surface waters during a bloom, there might be hundreds of visible aggregates in every cubic meter of water. At a depth of several hundred meters, there might be dozens. At 1,000 meters, only a few. At 3,000 meters, marine snow becomes rare, with individual flakes separated by vast volumes of water. But rare doesn't mean absent. Some fraction of the marine snow that forms at the surface does make it to great depths. These are usually the largest, densest, fastest sinking aggregates. They're the ones that formed quickly during intense blooms, grew large enough to sink rapidly and escaped most of the consumption and decomposition during their descent. These particles carry the memory of surface productivity down into the abyssal ocean, delivering food to a realm that hasn't seen sunlight in millions of years. And then there are the special delivery systems. Every evening in the ocean, something remarkable happens. Animals that spend their days in the deep, dark waters of the twilight zone, hundreds or even 1,000 meters down, begin to swim upward. They're heading to the surface to feed under cover of darkness. This is called diel vertical migration, and it's been called the largest migration on Earth because of the sheer biomass involved. Billions upon billions of fish, shrimp, squid, and other creatures rise toward the surface every night. They feed on phytoplankton and zooplankton in the upper waters, filling their stomachs, and then as dawn approaches, they descend back into the depths. But they don't descend empty. The food they've eaten comes with them. Some of it is digested and metabolized, but some is excreted as fecal pellets in the deep water. This creates what scientists call an active transport of carbon, distinct from the passive sinking of marine snow. These migrating animals are essentially pumps moving organic matter from surface to depth every single day. The journey of marine snow, then, is both passive and active, both physical and biological. It's a descent through darkness, through changing water layers, through clouds of hungry organisms, through bacterial decomposition and chemical transformation. Some particles make it to the seafloor, most do not. But even the particles that are consumed along the way play their role. They feed the creatures of the twilight zone. They release nutrients that support future growth. They participate in the great cycle that connects surface to depth, light to dark, death to new life. The falling continues. Day after day, year after year, the ocean experiences its perpetual snowfall, and the deep, dark waters below receive their slow, steady delivery of nourishment from the sunlit world above. Marine snow is beautiful to witness, essential for deep-sea life, but its importance extends far beyond aesthetics or ecology. This gentle rain of particles is one of the primary mechanisms by which Earth regulates its climate. It's part of what scientists call the biological carbon pump, and understanding how it works reveals just how interconnected the ocean, atmosphere, and life itself truly are. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is a greenhouse gas. It traps heat, warming the planet. Without any carbon dioxide, Earth would be a frozen ball of ice. With too much, the planet becomes too hot for most life as we know it. The concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is therefore crucial for determining Earth's climate, and the ocean plays an enormous role in controlling that concentration. When carbon dioxide dissolves in seawater, it undergoes a series of chemical reactions. It combines with water molecules to form carbonic acid, which then dissociates into bicarbonate and carbonate ions. This dissolved inorganic carbon can remain in the ocean for a very long time, effectively removed from the atmosphere. The ocean has absorbed about a quarter of all the carbon dioxide that humans have released by burning fossil fuels. Without the ocean's capacity to absorb carbon dioxide, atmospheric concentrations would be far higher than they are today, and climate change would be even more severe. But the ocean's ability to absorb carbon dioxide depends on more than just chemistry. It depends on biology. Phytoplankton at the ocean's surface use carbon dioxide dissolved in seawater to build their cells through photosynthesis. They convert inorganic carbon into sugars and proteins and lipids. When these phytoplankton die and sink as marine snow, they carry that organic carbon downward away from the surface, away from contact with the atmosphere. This downward transport of organic carbon is export production. It's the amount of carbon that leaves the surface layer before being recycled back into carbon dioxide. Not all the carbon fixed by phytoplankton is exported. Most of it is respired back to carbon dioxide in the upper ocean through food web processes. Zooplankton eat phytoplankton and breathe out carbon dioxide. Bacteria decompose dead cells and release carbon dioxide. Fish feed and metabolize and excrete. In the bright, warm surface waters, life is active and carbon cycles quickly. But the fraction that does sink, the fraction that becomes marine snow and descends into deeper waters, is sequestered. Once carbon reaches depths below about 500 meters, it's considered effectively removed from the atmosphere for timescales relevant to human civilization. The water at these depths is isolated from the surface for hundreds to thousands of years. Even if the organic carbon is eventually respired by deep-sea bacteria or consumed by deep-sea animals, the carbon dioxide it produces remains in the deep ocean, not entering the atmosphere. This is the biological carbon pump. Phytoplankton fix carbon at the surface. Marine snow transports it to depth. The deep ocean stores it, and this process removes approximately 10 gigatons of carbon from contact with the atmosphere every year. To put that in perspective, humans currently emit about 10 gigatons of carbon per year by burning fossil fuels. The biological carbon pump is therefore operating at a scale comparable to all human carbon emissions. Without the biological carbon pump, atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations would be roughly double what they are now. The climate would be dramatically warmer, sea levels would be higher, ice sheets would be smaller or absent. The biological pump isn't a new phenomenon invented in response to human activities. It's been operating for hundreds of millions of years, cycling carbon, regulating climate, keeping the planet habitable. But understanding it is crucial as we try to predict how Earth's climate will respond to our ongoing carbon emissions. The efficiency of the biological pump varies across the ocean. In some regions, especially where nutrients are abundant and phytoplankton growth is vigorous, export production is high. Large amounts of carbon sink into the deep ocean. In other regions where nutrients are scarce, phytoplankton growth is limited and less carbon is exported. Seasonal variations matter too. Spring and summer blooms create pulses of marine snow that deliver huge amounts of carbon to depth all at once. In winter, when light is limited and phytoplankton growth slows, export production decreases. Ocean currents play a role as well. In regions where deep water upwells to the surface, bringing nutrients from below, productivity can be very high. But this upwelling also brings back some of the carbon that had been stored at depth, returning it to the surface where it can exchange with the atmosphere again. The balance between carbon export and carbon upwelling determines whether a region of ocean is a net carbon sink or source. Climate change is already affecting the biological carbon pump. Warming surface waters can increase stratification, creating a sharper boundary between warm surface water and cold deep water. This stronger stratification can reduce the upwelling of nutrients, potentially decreasing phytoplankton productivity. It can also affect the sinking rate of marine snow. In more stratified oceans, particles might be remineralized at shallower depths, releasing carbon back to the atmosphere more quickly. Ocean acidification, caused by the ocean absorbing excess carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, can affect the organisms that produce marine snow. Some phytoplankton have calcium carbonate shells that help weight marine snow aggregates, making them sink faster. As the ocean becomes more acidic, forming these shells becomes more difficult. If shell-forming organisms decline, the composition and sinking speed of marine snow could change, altering the efficiency of the carbon pump. Changes in ocean circulation patterns due to climate change could shift where and when marine snow is produced. Changes in wind patterns could affect upwelling zones. Changes in temperature could alter the timing of phytoplankton blooms. All of these factors interact in complex ways that scientists are working hard to understand. The stakes are high. If the biological carbon pump weakens, the ocean's ability to absorb carbon dioxide decreases. More carbon dioxide remains in the atmosphere, accelerating climate change. But if we can understand the biological pump well enough to predict its behavior, we might be able to better forecast future climate and make more informed decisions about how to respond to the changes already underway. Marine snow, then, is not just food for the deep sea, it's a climate regulator. Every falling aggregate is a tiny parcel of sequestered carbon, removed from the atmosphere, stored in the ocean's interior. The gentle rain continues, day after day, absorbing carbon, transporting it downward, helping to keep our planet's climate in balance. It's been doing this for far longer than humans have existed, and it will continue long after we're gone, as long as there is sunlight and phytoplankton and the eternal cycles of the ocean. Below the sunlit surface waters, beyond the reach of photosynthesis, the ocean becomes a very different place. Light fades rapidly with depth. By 200 meters, most visible light has been absorbed or scattered. Photosynthesis becomes impossible. This is the beginning of what oceanographers call the twilight zone or mesopelagic zone, a vast realm extending from about 200 to 1,000 meters depth, where dim blue light gradually fades to complete darkness. below 1,000 meters is the midnight zone, or bathypelagic zone. No sunlight reaches here. The water is cold, typically just a few degrees above freezing. Pressure is immense, increasing by 1 atmosphere every 10 meters of depth. In the deepest trenches, pressure can exceed 1,000 atmospheres, enough to crush most submersibles. This is an environment hostile to human life, yet it teems with creatures adapted to these extreme conditions. And all of them, every single organism living below the photic zone, depends directly or indirectly on marine snow. Without the continuous rain of organic particles from above, the deep ocean would be nearly barren, a vast cold desert with only sparse life clustered around hydrothermal vents and other chemosynthetic oases. But marine snow changes everything. It brings food, energy, nutrients, and life to the darkness. Filter feeders are everywhere in the deep ocean. They extend nets, tentacles, arms, or specialized feeding structures into the water, straining out marine snow particles as they sink past. Some animals remain stationary, attached to the seafloor or to rocks, waving their feeding appendages in the current. Others drift freely through the water column, filtering as they go. Sea lilies and feather stars, ancient relatives of starfish and sea urchins, perch on stalks or cling to the bottom, their feathery arms spread wide to catch falling particles. They look like plants, like delicate underwater flowers, but they're animals, patiently filtering the rain of marine snow. They've been doing this for hundreds of millions of years. Fossils of sea lilies date back to the Ordovician period, nearly 500 million years ago, and they've barely changed since. Marine snow was falling then too, and these creatures were already adapted to harvest it. Sponges, some of the simplest multicellular animals, pump water through their porous bodies, filtering out bacteria and tiny particles of organic matter. Deep-sea sponges can grow to enormous sizes, some forming structures the size of cars. They grow slowly, some adding only millimeters per year, but they can live for centuries or even millennia. Their longevity is possible because they're so efficient at extracting nutrition from the sparse rain of marine snow. Corals, too, live in the deep ocean, far from the sun-dependent reef-building corals of tropical shallows. These deep-sea corals don't have symbiotic algae to feed them through photosynthesis. Instead, they extend polyps to catch zooplankton and marine snow. They build intricate structures, creating habitats for other creatures. Some deep-sea coral reefs are tens of thousands of years old, ancient living structures built particle by particle from the ocean's falling snow. Brittle stars, relatives of starfish, blanket portions of the deep sea floor in some regions, their long, spindly arms reaching upward to snag falling aggregates. They can occur in densities of hundreds per square meter, creating carpets of waving arms all competing for the same limited food supply. When a large piece of marine snow drifts by, or when a dead animal falls to the seafloor, brittle stars converge on it in writhing masses, an underwater feeding frenzy in slow motion. Sea cucumbers, soft-bodied relatives of sea urchins and starfish, creep across the seafloor on tiny tube feet, vacuuming up marine snow that has settled onto the sediment. They're the earthworms of the deep ocean, constantly processing sediment, extracting whatever nutrition they can find, excreting the rest as neat coils of processed mud. In some regions, sea cucumbers are the dominant animals on the seafloor, and they process enormous amounts of sediment over time, bioturbating the mud, mixing layers, affecting how carbon is buried. Swimming creatures also feed on marine snow. Copepods, tiny crustaceans the size of rice grains, are among the most abundant animals in the ocean. They occur at all depths, and many deep-sea species feed primarily on falling particles. They use their antennae and appendages to sense vibrations in the water, detecting the approach of a sinking aggregate, then dart forward to intercept it. For such small animals, a single large aggregate can be a feast, providing days' worth of nutrition. Krill and other larger crustaceans also feed on marine snow. Some species perform vertical migrations, rising to surface waters at night to feed on fresh phytoplankton, then descending to depth during the day where they excrete some of what they've eaten as fecal pellets that become part of the marine snow themselves. They're both consumers and producers of falling particles, active participants in the cycle that connects surface to depth. Then there are the specialists, creatures with specific adaptations for capturing marine snow. The vampire squid, despite its fearsome name, is actually a gentle filter feeder. It doesn't hunt large prey like other squid. Instead, it extends two long filaments covered in sticky cells, holding them out into the water like fishing lines. When marine snow particles stick to the filaments, the vampire squid reels them in and scrapes off the accumulated food with its arms. It can survive on a diet that would starve most other cephalopods, thriving in the oxygen-poor waters of the deep twilight zone, where few other predators can survive. These ill larvae, drifting in the open ocean during their early life stages, rely heavily on marine snow during their development. They can spend months in the plankton, growing slowly, feeding on falling particles. The nutrition in marine snow allows them to survive this vulnerable stage when they're too small to hunt larger prey. Salps, the barrel-shaped gelatinous animals that produce marine snow through their mucous webs, also consume it. They filter particles from the water, including smaller marine snow aggregates, concentrating them into larger fecal pellets that sink faster. Salps can occur in enormous numbers during blooms, and their feeding and excretion can significantly accelerate the transport of carbon to depth. Many fish in the deep ocean feed opportunistically on marine snow. They can't rely on it as their only food source because aggregates are too sparse to support an active predator's metabolism. But they supplement their diet of smaller fish and zooplankton with whatever falling particles they encounter. In a food-scarce environment, every calorie matters. The feeding strategies vary, but the dependence is universal. Whether filter feeding or actively hunting, whether stationed at the bottom or swimming freely, whether eating aggregates directly or eating creatures that eat aggregates, all deep-sea life is connected to marine snow. It's the foundation of the deep-sea food web, the primary source of energy in a realm where sunlight never penetrates. And it's not a constant supply. Marine snow falls in pulses following the seasonal rhythms of surface productivity. After a spring or summer bloom in the surface waters, a pulse of marine snow descends into the depths weeks or months later. Deep-sea creatures experience these pulses as periods of abundance followed by periods of scarcity. Some animals can store energy during the abundant times, building up fat reserves to carry them through lean periods. Others reproduce seasonally, timing their breeding to coincide with the arrival of food pulses. Scientists have documented these seasonal signals, even at depths of several thousand meters, in trenches and on abyssal plains far from sunlight. The presence of fresh phytoplankton material in the sediments, the increased activity of seafloor communities, the growth patterns in corals and sponges, all show evidence of seasonal pulses of marine snow arriving from above. The deep ocean is connected to the surface, linked by this continuous but variable rain of organic matter. Without marine snow, the deep ocean would be almost empty of life, a vast cold expanse with only scattered organisms eking out an existence. With marine snow, it becomes a frontier, still sparse compared to surface waters but alive, functioning, filled with creatures that have found ways to thrive in one of Earth's most challenging environments. The falling snow makes it possible. The gentle rain brings life to the darkness. If you could shrink yourself down to the size of a bacterium and ride along on a marine snow aggregate, you'd find yourself in a bustling metropolis. What appears to the naked eye as a single flake of organic debris is at the microscale an entire ecosystem, a floating world hosting thousands or even millions of microorganisms in a space smaller than a pea. Bacteria are the most abundant residents of marine snow. They colonize aggregates almost immediately after formation, attaching themselves to the sticky surfaces, feeding on the rich organic matter. The concentration of bacteria on marine snow can be 1,000 times higher than in the surrounding seawater. Free-living bacteria drift through the ocean, moving with currents, encountering dilute concentrations of dissolved nutrients. But bacteria on marine snow have hit the jackpot, a concentrated source of food, a substrate to attach to, and neighbors to interact with. These bacterial communities are remarkably diverse. Hundreds of different species can coexist on a single aggregate. Some specialize in breaking down proteins, secreting enzymes that cleave peptide bonds and release amino acids. Others focus on carbohydrates, degrading the complex polysaccharides that make up phytoplankton cell walls and the sticky gels that hold aggregates together. Some break down lipids, extracting energy from fats and oils. Still others consume nucleic acids, recycling the DNA and RNA from dead cells. This division of labor creates a microbial assembly line. One species breaks down a complex molecule into simpler components. Another species consumes those components and produces different waste products. A third species uses those waste products, and so on. Nutrients cycle through the bacterial community, being transformed and retransformed, with each step extracting a little more energy. The bacteria respire, consuming oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide. This respiration can create microenvironments on the aggregate's surface where oxygen is depleted. In these anoxic microhabitats, different bacteria thrive, ones that use nitrate or sulfate instead of oxygen to metabolize organic matter. The aggregate becomes chemically heterogeneous, with different conditions in different regions supporting different microbial communities just millimeters apart. Fungi also colonize marine snow. For a long time, marine fungi were understudied and underappreciated, but recent research has revealed that they're widespread and important. Fungi excel at breaking down complex organic molecules like chitin and cellulose, compounds that many bacteria struggle with. They can penetrate into the interior of aggregates, sending filaments through the structure, breaking it down from within. In the deep ocean, aggregates collected from bathypelagic depths have been found to contain high proportions of fungi, suggesting they play a major role in decomposition in the deep sea. Protists are there too. These are eukaryotic microorganisms, more complex than bacteria, including things like ciliates and flagellates and amoebas. Some protists graze on the bacteria, consuming them in large numbers, keeping bacterial populations in check. This grazing pressure prevents any single bacterial species from dominating, maintaining the diversity of the community. Other protists are themselves decomposers, feeding directly on the organic matter of the aggregate. Viruses infect bacteria on marine snow, lysing their host cells, releasing cellular contents back into the immediate environment. These viral infections can rapidly reduce bacterial populations, but they also release organic matter that other bacteria can then use. Viruses are a force for recycling within the aggregate's microbial community, accelerating the turnover of nutrients. The aggregate is porous, full of tiny channels and spaces. Water flows through these spaces, driven by the aggregate's motion through the water and by the swimming of organisms within it. This flow brings fresh oxygen and nutrients into the interior and carries away waste products. But the flow isn't fast. The interior of a large aggregate can become stratified, with gradients in oxygen, pH, and nutrient concentrations. In this structured environment, bacterial cells communicate. They produce and detect chemical signals, a process called quorum sensing. When bacterial populations reach high densities, these signals trigger changes in gene expression. Bacteria might start producing different enzymes, or forming biofilms, or releasing toxins. Quorum sensing allows bacteria to coordinate their behavior, responding collectively to conditions in their environment. The aggregate is also a site of nutrient regeneration. As bacteria break down organic matter, they release nutrients in inorganic forms that phytoplankton can use if the water returns to the surface. Nitrogen in proteins is converted to ammonia, and then to nitrate. Phosphorus in nucleic acids and phospholipids is released as phosphate. These regenerated nutrients can remain dissolved in the water after the aggregate has sunk or been consumed, enriching intermediate depths and supporting new growth if ocean currents bring the water back to the sunlit zone. This process of remineralization is crucial for the ocean's nutrient cycles. If all the nutrients incorporated into organic matter simply sank to the seafloor and were buried, the surface ocean would eventually become depleted of nutrients. Phytoplankton growth would cease, and the ocean would become far less productive. But because bacteria on marine snow remineralize much of the organic matter as it sinks, nutrients are released at various depths, creating reservoirs that can be tapped by future upwelling. The efficiency of the biological carbon pump depends on the balance between remineralization and sequestration. If too much organic matter is remineralized in shallow waters, less carbon makes it to depth and the pump is weaker. If remineralization happens deeper, more carbon is sequestered. Bacteria on marine snow, through their metabolic activity, help determine this balance. Different marine snow aggregates are dominated by different microbial communities. Aggregates formed from diatom blooms might have communities specialized for breaking down silica frustules and diatom-specific compounds. Aggregates rich in zooplankton fecal pellets might host different bacteria adapted to partially digested material. The composition of the aggregate influences the microbial community. and the microbial community influences how quickly the aggregate is broken down. In recent years, scientists have used molecular techniques to study the genetics of bacteria living on marine snow. By sequencing the DNA and RNA from aggregate-associated microbes, researchers can identify which species are present and what genes they're expressing. These studies have revealed that marine snow communities are not random assemblages of whatever bacteria happen to be nearby. They're selected communities with specific adaptations for life on particles. Some bacteria have genes for producing adhesins, proteins that help them stick to surfaces. Others have genes for producing enzymes that break down specific compounds abundant in marine snow. Still others have genes for swimming toward aggregates, sensing chemical gradients and moving toward higher concentrations of attractive compounds. Marine snow selects for bacteria that can exploit this niche. The microbial communities on marine snow are transient. An aggregate that forms at the surface might be colonized by one set of bacteria. As it sinks and conditions change, different bacteria may take over. The community shifts with depth, with time, with the changing chemistry of the aggregate. It's a succession, a changing cast of microbial characters playing out their roles in the life and death of a sinking particle. And then the aggregate is consumed by a zooplankton, or fragmented by turbulence, or reaches the seafloor and is buried. The microbial community is dispersed. Some bacteria are eaten and digested, others are released back into the water column, free living once more, waiting to encounter another aggregate. The cycle continues. Marine snow then is not just food, it's habitat. It's a microbial ecosystem, a floating world that travels from surface to depth, harboring communities of bacteria, fungi, protists and viruses, all interacting, all transforming organic matter, all playing their part in the ocean's grand cycles of carbon and nutrients. Invisible to the eye, crucial to the functioning of the ocean, these microbial cities ride the falling snow into the deep. The ocean may not have leaves that change color or snow that melts with spring, but it absolutely has seasons. And those seasons are written in the patterns of marine snow falling through its depths. The amount, composition and timing of marine snow vary dramatically depending on location and time of year, creating rhythms that echo through the entire water column. In temperate and polar oceans, seasonal changes are pronounced. Winter brings short days and weak sunlight, while surface waters cool. Storms mix the upper ocean, churning nutrients from depth back to the surface. But phytoplankton growth is limited by lack of light. Primary production is low. Marine snow production is correspondingly low. The falling particles are sparse. The rain of organic matter reduced to a gentle drizzle. Then comes spring. Days lengthen. Sunlight strengthens. The surface water begins to stratify, creating a stable layer where phytoplankton can remain in the light instead of being mixed down into darkness. And most importantly, nutrients accumulated during winter's mixing are still available. The conditions are perfect for a bloom. Phytoplankton populations explode. In a matter of days or weeks, cell concentrations can increase 100-fold or more. The water changes color, turning green or brown depending on the dominant species. Satellite images show these blooms spreading across thousands of square miles. From space, the ocean's spring awakening is visible. But blooms don't last. Eventually, phytoplankton exhaust the available nutrients, or zooplankton populations grow large enough to graze them down, or viral infections sweep through the population. The bloom crashes. Phytoplankton die in enormous numbers, and all that organic matter begins to sink. This creates a pulse of marine snow. Suddenly, instead of a sparse drizzle of particles, there's a blizzard. Aggregates form rapidly as dead cells and debris collide and stick together. The water becomes thick with falling flakes. This pulse can be so intense that it's visible in sediment traps, instruments placed on the seafloor to collect sinking material. Traps deployed during bloom periods collect far more material than traps deployed at other times of year. The pulse of marine snow sinks downward, taking weeks to reach the deep ocean. When it arrives, it's like a feast after a famine for the creatures of the deep. Seafloor communities respond to these pulses with increased activity. Sediment-dwelling organisms burrow more actively. Filter feeders grow faster. Even deep-sea fish populations show seasonal patterns linked to the arrival of food from above. Scientists have documented these seasonal signals at depths of 4,000 meters in abyssal plains far from continents. The seasonal pulse of marine snow from spring blooms in surface waters reaches even these remote depths, connecting the bright, productive surface with the cold, dark abyssal realm. The deep ocean has seasons, delivered to it in the form of falling organic matter. Summer brings different conditions. In many regions, surface waters become strongly stratified. Warm, nutrient-poor water sits atop cooler, nutrient-rich water, and the two don't mix. Nutrients in the surface layer become depleted. Phytoplankton growth slows. Marine snow production decreases. The summer ocean, despite abundant sunlight, is often less productive than spring. In autumn, storms return. Cooling temperatures and strong winds begin to break down stratification. Nutrients start to mix back into surface waters. In some regions, there's a fall bloom, a second pulse of phytoplankton growth and marine snow production before winter shuts down productivity again. Tropical oceans experience different seasonal patterns. Near the equator, day length doesn't vary much through the year. Temperatures remain relatively constant. Stratification is persistent. Nutrients are often scarce in surface waters. As a result, tropical oceans tend to have lower overall productivity than temperate or polar oceans, and marine snow production is more constant through the year, without the dramatic bloom and crash cycles of higher latitudes. But tropical oceans aren't uniform. Upwelling zones, where ocean currents bring nutrient-rich deep water to the surface, can be highly productive even in the tropics. These upwelling regions support abundant phytoplankton, large populations of fish, and substantial marine snow production. The marine snow from upwelling zones feeds deep-sea communities in tropical waters. Monsoons create seasonal patterns in some tropical regions. Wind patterns shift with the seasons, driving upwelling or suppressing it. Riverine inputs of nutrients from land can vary with wet and dry seasons. These variations create pulses of productivity and marine snow even in the tropics. Ocean currents influence marine snow patterns too. The Gulf Stream carries warm water northward along the east coast of North America, where this warm current interacts with colder waters. Productivity can be enhanced, creating bands of elevated marine snow production. The Kuroshio Current does something similar in the Western Pacific. These major current systems shape where and when marine snow is produced. Mesoscale eddies, swirling currents tens to hundreds of kilometers across, create patchy patterns of productivity. Cyclonic eddies can bring nutrients to the surface, triggering localized blooms and enhanced marine snow. Anticyclonic eddies can suppress productivity. As eddies drift through the ocean, they create a shifting mosaic of high and low marine snow production. Wind-driven turbulence affects how aggregates form. Strong winds can create sufficient turbulence to fragment aggregates, breaking them apart and slowing their sinking. Calm conditions allow aggregates to grow larger before sinking. Weather patterns therefore influence not just how much marine snow is produced, but also how it sinks. El Niño and La Niña events create interannual variations in ocean productivity over vast regions of the Pacific. During El Niño, upwelling along the South American coast is suppressed, reducing productivity and marine snow production. During La Niña, upwelling is enhanced, increasing both. These climate oscillations create pulses and lulls in the delivery of organic matter to the deep Pacific. At high latitudes, sea ice influences marine snow patterns. When ice melts in spring and summer, it releases algae that had been growing in the ice. These algae sink and contribute to marine snow. The edge of the ice pack can be a region of enhanced productivity, with nutrients and meltwater creating favorable conditions for blooms. As climate change reduces polar sea ice, these patterns are shifting, with consequences for marine snow production that are still being studied. The variation in marine snow is not just seasonal but also spans longer timescales. Decadal oscillations in ocean circulation patterns, like the Pacific Decadal Oscillation and the Atlantic Multi-Decadal Oscillation, influence average productivity over years or decades. Ice ages and interglacial periods saw massive shifts in ocean productivity and marine snow, with consequences for carbon storage and climate. For organisms in the deep sea, these variations matter enormously. They've evolved life strategies adapted to the pulsed delivery of food. Some can store energy during times of abundance, surviving for months or years with little food. Others time their reproduction to coincide with food pulses. Still others have incredibly slow metabolisms, reducing their energy needs to almost nothing. The falling snow has rhythms, pulses, and patterns. It responds to seasons, to ocean currents, to weather and climate. It connects the surface ocean, where conditions change rapidly with light and temperature and wind, to the deep ocean, where conditions are stable and cold and dark. Through marine snow, the deep ocean experiences the seasons of the surface world, delivered slowly, particle by particle, in an endless gentle rain. Of all the marine snow that forms at the ocean's surface, only a small fraction, perhaps 1 to 5%, makes it all the way to the seafloor without being consumed or remineralized. But that small fraction adds up. Year after year, century after century, marine snow has been accumulating on the ocean floor, building layers of sediment that blanket vast areas of the deep sea. This sediment is called ooze. The name sounds undignified, almost comical, but it's technically accurate. Ooze is a soft, muddy sediment composed primarily of the remains of marine organisms. There are different types. Calcareous ooze is made mostly of calcium carbonate shells from foraminifera and coccolithophores, microscopic plankton, that built protective coverings of calcite. Silicious ooze is made of silica frustules from diatoms and radiolarians, plankton with glass-like shells. In some regions, particularly in the abyssal plains of the deep ocean, far from continents, ooze covers the seafloor as far as the eye can see, a smooth blanket of sediment stretching to the horizon. It's deep, in some places hundreds of meters thick, accumulated over millions of years. Coring into this ooze is like reading a history book, with each layer representing a different time period, recording changes in ocean conditions, climate, and life. The rate at which ooze accumulates is astonishingly slow by human standards. In the deep ocean, far from riverine inputs of terrigenous sediment, the ooze builds up at rates measured in millimeters per 1,000 years. One study estimated that the ocean floor accumulates about 6 meters of sediment every million years from the continuous fall of marine snow. That's roughly 6 millimeters per 1,000 years, or about the thickness of a fingernail over a human lifetime. But slow doesn't mean insignificant. Multiplied across the vast area of the ocean floor, this accumulation represents an enormous quantity of carbon being buried and removed from the active carbon cycle. Carbon that sinks to the seafloor and gets buried in sediments is sequestered on geological timescales. It won't return to the atmosphere for millions of years, if ever. It becomes part of sedimentary rocks, eventually perhaps part of continents. The ooze is not lifeless. Even on the seafloor at depths of 4,000 or 5,000 meters, life persists. Bacteria live in the sediments, slowly decomposing the organic matter in buried marine snow. They consume oxygen dissolved in seawater trapped in the pore spaces between sediment grains, and when oxygen is depleted, they switch to other electron acceptors, using nitrate, manganese, iron, sulfate, or even producing methane through methanogenesis. This microbial activity continues deep into the sediment column, meters or even tens of meters below the seafloor. The rate of activity decreases with depth as the most easily degradable organic matter is consumed first, but it never stops entirely. Bacteria have been found living in sediments thousands of meters below the seafloor, in rocks millions of years old, metabolizing at rates so slow they might divide only once per century. Larger organisms live on the surface of the sediment, and in its upper layers. Worms burrow through the ooze, ingesting sediment and extracting whatever nutrition they can find. Sea cucumbers plow across the surface, vacuuming up sediment, processing it through their guts. Brittle stars and sea urchins and various crustaceans pick through the ooze, searching for larger pieces of organic matter, perhaps a dead fish or a piece of wood that sank from above. These sediment dwellers bioturbate the ooze, mixing layers, creating burrows and tracks and mounds. This bioturbation affects how carbon is buried. It can bring deeper sediment back to the surface where oxygen is available, allowing further decomposition. It can also bury fresh organic matter more quickly, protecting it from decomposition. The biological activity of seafloor communities influences the long-term fate of carbon. In some regions, particularly near continents, the seafloor is not smooth. Submarine canyons cut through the continental slope, funneling sediment from shallow water into the deep. Turbidity currents, underwater avalanches of sediment-laden water, rush down these canyons, depositing thick layers of sediment in deep-sea fans at their mouths. These events can bury marine snow and other organic matter rapidly, creating pulses of burial. In other regions, Ocean currents scour the seafloor, preventing sediment from accumulating. Rock or hard substrate is exposed, and the ooze never builds up. These are the deep-sea equivalents of deserts, rocky wastelands with little life. But even here, marine snow is important. The particles that do settle, even temporarily, provide food for attached filter feeders. Hydrothermal vents create oases of life on the seafloor, powered by chemosynthesis rather than photosynthesis. Bacteria around the vents use chemicals in the hot vent water, particularly hydrogen sulfide, to produce energy. But even these vent communities aren't entirely independent of the surface ocean. Marine snow still falls on them, contributing organic matter, and some vent animals supplement their chemosynthetic diet with filter feeding. The burial of marine snow in seafloor sediments closes the loop on the biological carbon pump. Carbon that was fixed by phytoplankton at the surface, packaged into aggregates, transported to depth, and finally buried in ooze, is effectively removed from the active carbon cycle. It's stored, potentially for millions of years, until geological processes raise the sediments back up into shallow water or onto land where weathering can release the carbon again. This geological carbon cycle operates on timescales far longer than the biological carbon pump, but it's been crucial in regulating Earth's climate over the history of the planet. During periods when marine productivity was very high and burial rates were elevated, atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations decreased, cooling the climate. During periods of low productivity and burial, carbon dioxide built up, warming the climate. The sediments themselves become a record. Scientists core into the ooze, extracting cylinders of sediment representing millions of years of accumulation. By analyzing the chemistry and fossils in different layers, they can reconstruct past ocean conditions, past climates, past patterns of productivity in marine snow. These sediment cores have revealed ice age cycles, shifts in ocean circulation, mass extinctions, and recoveries. The deep-sea ooze is a library, storing information about Earth's past, written in the shells and organic matter of marine snow. Every layer is a year or a decade or a century, depending on the accumulation rate. Every particle was once part of the living ocean, part of the endless cycle of growth and death, sinking and burial. And the burial continues. Right now, marine snow is landing on the seafloor, adding to the ooze, contributing to the sediment that will one day tell the story of our time. The carbon in this year's marine snow will be sequestered, removed from the atmosphere, stored in the deep. The gentle rain of particles falling continuously builds the archive layer by layer, grain by grain, a testament to the ocean's role in shaping our planet. For most of human history, marine snow was unknown. People knew the ocean's surface, felt its waves, saw its storms, harvested its fish. But what happened beneath, in the vast dark interior, remained a mystery. It wasn't until the 20th century, with the development of deep-diving technology, that humans could directly observe the falling particles William Beebe called marine snow. Even after Beebe's discovery, marine snow was difficult to study. You can't easily collect it without disturbing it. Trying to scoop up aggregates with nets or bottles fragments them, changing their size, structure, and behavior. Scientists needed new approaches, new technologies to understand this ephemeral phenomenon. In the mid-20th century, sediment traps became a primary tool. These are simple in concept, essentially funnels or cylinders deployed on the seafloor or at specific depths, left to collect settling particles for days or weeks or months. When retrieved, the traps contain marine snow and other sinking material, which can be analyzed for quantity, composition, and chemical characteristics. Sediment traps revealed the pulsed nature of marine snow, showing seasonal variations in the flux of organic matter to depth. They demonstrated that some regions of the ocean export far more carbon than others. They provided data for estimating the global carbon flux through the biological pump, but they had limitations. They collect everything that sinks, integrating over time and space. They can't show the behavior of individual aggregates or the spatial distribution of particles in the water column. Underwater cameras changed that. Starting in the late 20th century, scientists began deploying cameras on submersibles, remotely operated vehicles, and autonomous platforms. These cameras could photograph or video marine snow in situ, showing the particles as they naturally occur in the water. Suddenly it became possible to see what Beebe had seen, to watch the falling snow with your own eyes, even if those eyes were cameras thousands of meters deep. The images were revelations. Marine snow is far more abundant and diverse than most scientists had realized. Particles range from tiny flecks barely visible in camera images to massive aggregates the size of your fist or larger. They tumble and spin as they fall, trailing wisps and streamers. They're colonized by bacteria, creating halos of microbial activity. They're intercepted by zooplankton, by jellyfish, by fish. Remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, allowed scientists to explore the ocean at depth without leaving the surface ship. Controlled by operators using joysticks and video feeds, ROVs can dive to depths of several thousand meters, maneuver with precision, and carry sophisticated instruments. They've been used to study marine snow in the twilight zone, in the midnight zone, even in the deepest ocean trenches. Some ROVs carry specialized equipment for measuring marine snow in situ. Settling chambers, transparent tubes mounted on their ROV, allow individual aggregates to be isolated and their sinking speed measured directly. This has provided crucial data on how fast marine snow actually sinks in different conditions, confirming theoretical predictions and revealing unexpected behaviors. Structured light systems, which project a thin sheet of laser light into the water, allow cameras to image particles in silhouette. Software can then analyze the images, measuring the size, shape, and concentration of marine snow automatically. This has enabled large-scale surveys, building up statistical pictures of particle distribution in different ocean regions. Satellite observations have also become important. While satellites can't directly see marine snow, they can observe surface phytoplankton blooms using ocean color sensors. Chlorophyll, the pigment phytoplankton use for photosynthesis, changes the color of seawater. By measuring these color changes from space, scientists can estimate phytoplankton concentrations and productivity. This satellite data can be combined with models to estimate marine snow production and export. If you know how much phytoplankton is growing in a particular region, and you have models of how much of that production becomes marine snow and how fast it sinks, you can estimate the carbon flux to depth. These estimates have been crucial for understanding the global biological carbon pump and how it might change with climate. Molecular techniques have revolutionized the study of microbial communities on marine snow. By collecting aggregates and sequencing the DNA from the microbes living on them, scientists can identify which bacteria, fungi, and protists are present. They can determine which genes are being expressed, revealing what metabolic processes are active. This has shown that marine snow hosts incredibly diverse microbial communities with complex interactions. Autonomous floats and gliders, robotic platforms that drift or swim through the ocean for months or years, are now being equipped with instruments to measure marine snow. Some carry cameras photographing particles as the float rises and sinks. Others carry optical sensors that detect particle concentrations. These autonomous platforms can collect data continuously over long periods, filling in seasonal and interannual patterns that ship-based studies would miss. Stable isotope tracers have been used to track the fate of marine snow. Scientists can grow phytoplankton in laboratory conditions with isotopically labeled carbon or nitrogen, then release these cells into the ocean and track where the label goes. Some ends up in zooplankton that ate the phytoplankton, some sinks as marine snow. By collecting samples at different depths and measuring the isotopic label, scientists can determine how much carbon was exported and how fast. Computer models have become essential for synthesizing all this diverse data. Ocean biogeochemistry models simulate phytoplankton growth, marine snow production, sinking, remineralization, and burial. They incorporate physical oceanography, biological processes, and chemical transformations. By comparing model predictions to observations, scientists can test their understanding and identify what's still uncertain. These models have shown that marine snow production and export are sensitive to many factors: changes in ocean temperature, nutrient availability, phytoplankton community composition, zooplankton grazing, bacterial decomposition rates, all affect how much carbon reaches the deep ocean. As climate changes, all these factors are shifting, and models help predict the consequences. Recent studies have uncovered surprising details about marine snow physics. The way particles sink through stratified water is more complex than previously thought. The porosity and shape of aggregates matter in unexpected ways. The turbulence generated by sinking particles affects their drag. Each new finding refines our understanding and improves our ability to predict how marine snow behaves. There's still so much to learn. Scientists don't fully understand what controls the formation of marine snow, why some blooms produce lots of aggregates and others don't. They're still working out the details of microbial processes on particles, how bacteria and fungi collaborate or compete, what limits their activity. They don't know how climate change will affect the quality and quantity of marine snow in different ocean regions. But the tools keep improving. Imaging technology gets better. Genetic sequencing gets cheaper and faster. Models become more sophisticated. Autonomous platforms become more capable. Each advance brings new insights into this fundamental ocean process. Marine snow, once invisible and unknown, is now observable, measurable, and increasingly understood. We can watch it fall. We can measure its speed. We can analyze its composition. We can track its microbial inhabitants. We can model its role in the carbon cycle. And with each observation, each experiment, each model run, we come closer to fully understanding the gentle rain that feeds the deep and regulates our planet's climate. And now, as we drift toward the end of tonight's journey, let's pause and consider what marine snow truly represents. It's easy to think of it as debris, as waste, as the leftover scraps of surface life raining down into the abyss, but that would miss the profound beauty and importance of what's really happening. Marine snow is connection. It links the sunlit surface waters, bright and productive and teeming with life, to the cold, dark depths, sparse and quiet and patient. It carries energy and nutrients across this vast divide, making it possible for life to exist where no sunlight reaches. Without marine snow, the deep ocean would be nearly barren, a vast cold desert. With it, the depths host astonishing diversity, from microbes to fish to corals to creatures we're still discovering. Marine snow is transformation. It takes dead phytoplankton cells, tiny and nearly weightless, and transforms them through aggregation and biology into particles that can sink a mile or more. It takes dissolved nutrients and packages them into forms that can be transported. It converts organic carbon into food, into sediment, into geological storage. Every step of the journey involves transformation, particles growing, shrinking, being consumed, being remineralized, changing form and composition as they descend. Marine snow is time. The particles falling right now, drifting through the twilight zone, will take weeks to reach the abyssal plains. The organic matter buried in seafloor sediments today will remain there for millions of years, storing carbon, preserving a record of our time. The cycle from phytoplankton bloom to marine snow to seafloor sediment to eventual uplift and weathering operates on timescales from days to eons. Marine snow connects the rapid cycles of surface biology to the slow cycles of geology. Marine snow is climate regulation by transporting carbon from the atmosphere, where it traps heat, to the deep ocean, where it's stored. Marine snow helps keep Earth's climate habitable. Without this biological carbon pump operating continuously for hundreds of millions of years, atmospheric carbon dioxide would be much higher, temperatures much warmer. The gentle rain of particles, falling constantly, is one of the planet's fundamental climate control mechanisms. Marine snow is resilience and fragility both. The process has operated through ice ages and warm periods, through mass extinctions and recoveries. It adapts. When phytoplankton communities change, different types of marine snow form. When ocean conditions shift, sinking rates and remineralization depths adjust. The system is robust, persistent, ancient, but it's also sensitive. Changes in temperature, acidity, nutrient availability, all can affect how much marine snow is produced, how fast it sinks, how efficiently carbon is sequestered. We're conducting an unplanned experiment on this system by changing the ocean's chemistry and physics, and we don't yet know all the consequences. Marine snow is beauty. If you could watch it fall, caught in the beam of a submersible's light, you'd see a slow-motion underwater snowfall, particles tumbling and spinning in the dark water, some tiny and bright, others large and fluffy, all descending together into the depths. It's hypnotic, peaceful, mesmerizing. William Beebe saw it and was moved to poetry. Every scientist who has witnessed it describes a similar sense of wonder. And marine snow is humility. It reminds us how much of Earth's functioning is invisible to us, happening beneath the surface, out of sight. For most of history, we didn't know it existed. Now we know it exists, but we're still learning how it works, what controls it, how it will respond to the changes we're imposing on the ocean. It reminds us that the ocean is not passive, not unchanging, but active, dynamic, full of processes we're only beginning to understand. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, marine snow is falling. In every ocean, at every latitude, in the bright tropics and the cold poles, in productive coastal waters and sparse central gyres, particles are sinking. Some will be eaten before they've fallen 100 feet. Others will make it to the abyssal depths, settling onto ooze that has been accumulating for millions of years. The rain is continuous, gentle, essential. Phytoplankton are photosynthesizing at the surface right now, fixing carbon, growing, eventually dying. Bacteria are colonizing aggregates, breaking down organic matter, releasing nutrients. Zooplankton are filtering particles from the water, packaging them into denser pellets. Deep-sea creatures are extending arms and tentacles into the darkness, catching the falling flakes, sustaining themselves on this slow delivery of food from the world above. The ocean breathes. It cycles carbon and nutrients. It supports life at all depths, and marine snow is part of its breath, its pulse, its fundamental rhythm. The gentle rain connects everything, from the smallest bacteria to the largest currents, from the briefest bloom to the slowest geological processes. You are connected too. The oxygen in your lungs came partly from phytoplankton, the tiny cells that eventually become marine snow. The climate that makes your life possible is partly regulated by the carbon transported by falling particles. The fish you've eaten may have fed on creatures that fed on marine snow. The ocean's health, which ultimately supports human civilization, depends on these processes continuing. So let the knowledge of marine snow be a comfort tonight. The ocean is working, cycling, transporting, storing, sustaining. The gentle rain is falling, as it has for hundreds of millions of years, as it will continue long into the future. There is a constancy to it, a reliability, a rhythm older than mountains. Rest now, drift gently. Let your thoughts settle like particles sinking through calm water. The ocean is vast, the process is complex, but at the heart of it all is something simple and beautiful. A soft, continuous rain of organic matter, falling through darkness, feeding life, regulating climate, connecting surface to depth, present to past, life to death to new life. The gentle rain continues. The marine snow falls, and in that falling, in that endless patient descent, there is peace. Sleep well. Dream of the deep, of the falling snow, of the quiet dark waters where life persists against all odds, sustained by the gentlest of rains. And wake tomorrow, knowing that the ocean continues its work, its endless cycles, its essential role in keeping our planet alive. Good night.